Good morning, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. In this video, we're going to talk about the rise in homelessness that has taken place across the nation, why it's happening, how it's happening, and what it is that we can do about it. Many times we look to the West Coast cities like LA, Portland, Seattle, and we want to blame these areas on liberal politics for the reason that we have massive homelessness that has taken place in these particular areas. And I think that's probably a quick and easy answer, and you can wash your hands of the whole problem, but it goes much deeper than that. And in order to understand what it is that we can do about it, we really have to understand why it's happening in the first place. You see all the efforts, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars even, going towards the ability to try and alleviate the problem, and you see the problem only gets worse. So if the hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars that is being thrown at these cities in order to try and alleviate the problem of homelessness, and it only gets worse, I think we really have to look at the root of the problem in a different fashion. Now, many of these areas like LA, Portland, Seattle, they were really once beautiful working class cities, and everybody really enjoyed being there because they had all kinds of really wonderful amenities and awesomeness that would be very attractive to a lot of people who would want to live in these areas. And so what ended up happening is that if you have a particular area that has very industrious people to it, if you have a rise of new money that comes in, and you also have to think, this is LA, Seattle, Portland, these are port cities. This is where a lot of stuff comes in. This is where a lot of people move to. California, especially like Southern California, LA, famous for movies and movie stars. When you think about what it is that brings new money into the area and what it is that those property owners do with that new money, if you have a continuous increase of new money and new property ownership, and the property ownership is going to people who are preferring higher standard of livings, luxurious experiences, then what you are going to find is that the working class is going to have a very difficult time operating inside of that environment. Now, this is what's taken place in a lot of these cities. I recognize it myself within the little town that I live in of Astoria, Oregon. Very famous for movies that were created here like The Goonies and Kindergarten Cop, and quite a few others that were filmed in our area here. Now, we aren't necessarily like the Hollywood of Oregon or anything like that, but we are fairly famous for our area here, and it is a very popular tourist attraction. Now, there was a time when I was a kid when most of the money that was made here came from fishing and logging. It was a fishing and logging community. As I grew up, things shifted. It shifted away from as all the logging and fishing, although it's still here, is not nearly as prevalent as it once was. Instead, the new money now comes in from remote workers, from the hospital district that's growing ever increasingly more, from the tourist attractions that are, whether it's a tourist attraction, but just the tourism that has taken place here in Astoria now is growing quite significant, and this is where the new money comes in. Well, when that new money comes in from these particular property owners, they start increasing their standard of living. Well, we started noticing in our area how all the restaurants started becoming more trendy and less dive bars and less like local hangouts. This is where the working class would be typically, and those aren't the same patrons that are now going to these particular restaurants and bars. And so what we find is that the property owners themselves and what they want within their experiences will then show itself within the local economy there. And this is what we are now seeing. So when you think about the increase in standard of living and those luxurious experiences, well, now the restaurants are more expensive to eat at. Right? The cost of living for a house is now more expensive because the people who you're competing with are now remote workers, hospital district, or hospital workers, which, generally have a higher income than somebody who's working at the restaurant themselves. And this is really where the separation starts to take place. Well, if you are in a community in which that you are a working class individual trying to compete against all these other new people or new money that's coming in, that's raising the cost of living of everything, well, now you find yourself having it more difficult to make your rent payments, making it more difficult to try and just, live in general. And eventually could find yourself in a point where if you have any kind of disruption to life, are no longer in your apartment find it very difficult to have that working class job just immediately be able to go out there and find another apartment or another place to live without taking on roommates or something of this nature. And this is really where the general deterioration starts to begin, as the working class individual who had typically had the ability to even have a way of life, whether it was a great way of life, at least you had a way of life living in that apartment and paying the bills. But if your regular job doesn't do it anymore because you're competing against all this new money or these people who are earning a higher wage that didn't necessarily live in your area before, now you're competing against those people, you find yourself in your car. And if you're in your car and you're working and you still can't make it, pretty soon you just give up on working altogether because you're not making it. And this is how the rise in homelessness really starts to take place, just simply in economics. Now, of course, as you're deteriorating, right, if you're in that house, that apartment, and it's getting tougher every single month, food expenses are going up, energy costs are going up, something happens to your car and it breaks down, the depression within your mind, right, starts to deteriorate, and starts to fall, and you're feeling terrible about the situation, and you start covering it up with alcohol or drugs or something of this nature. And this happens a lot, and I see it very frequently out there within the homeless community as they cover up the pain that they are feeling from their experiences of life by drinking it away every single day or getting high or whatever it is that, gets them to escape. And then once you're in that, it's very difficult to get out. Like most people who have been on the streets for a significant amount of time are now stuck in a survival mode. They're stuck in a deteriorated mindset that doesn't allow them to think properly in order to even acquire a job to get off the streets. It's just their mind just can't handle it anymore. And so it even comes down to not just the mental deterioration that's happening, but then also a lot of times once these people are on the streets, everything that they have is with them. This is it. They have it all. And I witnessed this just happen the other day, where the place that I work, a lot of you know that I work at a lumberyard. Across the street, there was a bread store. And in the parking lot of the bread store, what appeared to be, and she looked fairly well put together, but still didn't look like she had a place to be, what I assumed was this homeless girl who may be even traveling, trying to get somewhere, but she didn't really look like she was doing well, considering she had everything, looked like everything with her. So she had to move it in stages, move it from this place to that place and then kind of get it down the road, kind of hopscotching this stuff down the road. Well, she ended up in this parking lot. Now, I could see her kind of gather all her stuff up, make it nice and neat. And I'm thinking she's about ready to walk away from her stuff. I can tell. She's looking around, she's smoking a cigarette, she's what do I do? And I'm thinking she's going to go over to the little mini mart that's across the street, and she's going to get something to eat. I can just see it in her. That's what she's doing, all right? Well, next thing I know, that girl comes back, and she's in my store, and she's asking if there's any surveillance cameras that are pointing across the street because she went over to the mini mart to get something to eat, and somebody took all her stuff. And it was just amazing. It was like a 5 minutes that she had left her stuff, and everything that she owned in the world had just immediately disappeared. It just blew me away. I couldn't believe that I was watching it all go down just like that. And sure enough, this poor girl, she was just everything in her entire world was just gone. I was just I couldn't believe that she was sitting there asking me if there was any surveillance or anything that she could do to try and find what happened to her stuff. And I think, man, if everything in your entire world has to be held on to, how do you go to work? If you can't leave this stuff and this is your entire world, to us, it may not be that much. It's hey, it might be $100 worth of stuff if you're lucky or whatever. To them, it's everything in the entire world. Right? And so all of a sudden, all the stuff is just vanished, gone. What do you do now? Right? You're already on the street. You're already mentally deteriorated. And now everything that you have ever tried to collect is just vanished. Right? See, this is the problem that I think a lot of times people who have means or are making it, so to speak, have a place to be, they're not thinking what these people are thinking. And they're thinking, why don't they just get off the street? Why don't they get a job? They could go to work. They could do all this other stuff. The moment that they turn their back on their stuff, it's gone, right? It's immediately, it's out of there. Well, this isn't no way to live, right? This isn't any way that you can have a job and acquire the things that you need to have an apartment. You can't live like that, right? You can only live by holding on to everything you got with tight grip. And everything you're looking at is seemingly wanting to take it from you. And this is the way you live on a regular basis, every minute of the day. You're not sitting there trying to figure out what it is that you can do for business and networking and trying to figure out that next deal or whatever it is that you can advance. You're trying to figure out how you can just even hold on to your stuff while you try and find something to eat. Right? The problem that we seek nowadays is that the people themselves are not able to find a job that is going to give them enough to then get off the streets in a reasonable manner in a reasonable time. Working a regular job around here would take months of savings before you would be able to find or even get into an apartment. This is not a place that you can get off the streets from. So once you're here on the streets, it's very difficult to get yourself off. Off the streets. I guess I should say that properly. Right? It's like a magnet. So I watch all this money that gets thrown at the problem, and they build these beds, and they build these facilities, and they offer up all this food, and they do all these other things, and that's great. I mean, hey, if you can alleviate the pain for a little bit, but that's all you're going to do, because the economy and the way that it's rolling right now is not going to give these people an opportunity to get off the streets. Even if they were sober, even if they were mentally aware and all that other stuff, it would take such a significant amount of time, right, to be able to work a job, to save it up, to be able to get into the apartment, that is most likely not going to happen unless you have some serious support, and it's probably going to take family. If you don't have that family support and you're relying on government support or just volunteer support, and you're already mentally deteriorated and addicted to drugs, and unskilled, not working for decades, how is that going to how are you going to fix that? You can't. And all the money that you throw at the problem is going to make the problem worse. As you find that the alleviation of the problem starts to attract more problem. People from remote areas start to show up because they hear their support. And then you run out of the ability to support them, and now you have a group of people who are very frustrated, having gotten support in the past, no longer receiving it. And there is no solving the problem. If you wanted to solve the problem, the experience of the property owner shouldn't have been a rise into luxury. Once you started asking for a better meal, a better restaurant, better clothing, better cars, better locations, all that started separating or started creating the inequality, started separating the working class away from those who are the higher wage earners. And that working class individual who was working at that restaurant is no longer capable of living in the same city that they grew up in. This is very much taking place. Again, we can blame it on anything you want, but this is economics that is happening. The rise of an industrious area is going to move into luxurious experiences, which is going to make it very difficult on the lower working class people as the separation continues to increase, so long as that new money continues to pour in. And everywhere I look in my hometown, all I see is, the rise of hospital district, the rise of, tourism, the rise of, retirement community. This is all new money. This is all higher wage money, higher earned money. And it's all new money coming in, and it's making it very difficult on the working class. The homeless problem is going to get worse. If this continues, the homeless problem will get worse. Very little doubt in my mind. It's going to make it very difficult on the working class people to live here, and you're going to find them sleeping in their cars, sleeping out on the street, simply because the ability to earn a wage that is competitive against everybody else who is now earning higher wages is just simply not going to take place in this area. There's no solving the problem. Solving the problem would literally mean discipline amongst the property owner, rich people to not move into luxury. That would be fixing the problem. Everything else, no matter what you do, no matter how much you try, is going to create the problem and make it worse. All the help makes it worse. Uneducated economist. You guys let me know.